So today we're going to go right into the history, inshallah, and focus on the first two Khalifas after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, the two Khalifas after him were Abu Bakr and then Omar. And then after Abu Bakr and Umar, you had Uthman and Ali. I'm sure people are familiar with the first four Khalifas. In English, they're called Caliphs, and in Arabic, we call them Khalifa. And this was the name given to the leader of the Muslims after the Prophet ﷺ. And the first four Khalifas are very special status in Islamic history because for us, they're called the Khulafa al-Rashidun. The term Rashidun is based actually on hadith. The Prophet ﷺ actually said, after me there will be 30 years, there will be a Khilafah al-Rashida, or al-Khulafa al-Mahdiyin, the rightly guided. For 30 years after me, there will be a rightly guided caliphate or Khilafah. So that's why, and also these four are very leading Sahaba. They're the closest people to the Prophet ﷺ. So for Muslims, this particular period is a very special period. In Western history now, they've started calling it the Rashidun Caliphate, which is fine because we call it the Khilafah Rashida. So they've taken that from us. So it's called the Rashidun Caliphate. Now for us, it's even more important from an Islamic perspective because the Sunnah of the first four Khalifas is also considered to be a proof of the Sunnah, of this proof for the Deen, for our fiqh and things like that. In other words, we follow the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sunnah of these first four Khalifas after him. Once again, as is mentioned in the Hadith. So for all of those reasons, we're spending a bit more time looking at this particular period. So today we'll look at Abu Bakr and Umar, and then after that we'll look at Uthman and Ali. And then after that, inshallah, in the following days, we'll go into the later history. So just a quick reminder of the timeline we were looking at yesterday. So this is the actual timeline of the entire history from the birth of Islam here all the way up to our current European age which we're living in. So we're right at the beginning, obviously, here. The High Caliphate period includes the Khulafa al-Rashidun right at the beginning 30 years. The High Caliphate period is about almost 350, 400 year period here. Remember what did we say about the High Caliphate period? It's when the Muslim world is united, mainly united, under one Khalifa, one Caliph. Although it starts, there are some autonomous regions, but by and large, most of the Muslim world is united under first the Khulafa Rashidun, then the Umayyad, and then the Abbasids. Yeah? And we're going to talk about them in the following classes, inshallah. So, the other thing we will be doing, inshallah, as we go through, not today, but as we go through the course, we will also be looking at what's happening in Europe at the same time as what's happening in the Muslim world. Because I firmly believe that to understand Islamic history, we also have to understand European and Western history, and vice versa. Yeah? Because both of these histories are quite closely interrelated. Now, the relations start becoming more manifest a bit later on. During the High Caliphate period, there's not much link between the two. But as time goes on, the Muslim world and the Western world becomes much more interrelated and they affect each other in big ways. So we will also be looking at, so what's written in red on this timeline, the red, is actually what's happening in the European world, yeah, at the same time, to give it an idea. So during the High Caliphate period, which we're talking about today, or the beginning of it, in Europe we have the Dark Ages. So we have the Viking Age and what's known as the Barbarian Kingdoms. And later on, when we talk about the middle period, for the Islamic middle period, it corresponds to the European high medieval period or high Middle Ages, where we have the Normans, the castles, the armored knights, and all of those things that people have read about probably in their school history. And then when we talk about the gunpowder period, where we have the three great Muslim empires, the Mughal, Safavid, and Ottoman, in Europe we have the Renaissance, the Age of Discovery, and the Scientific Revolution. Those are the major things going on at that time, and it's called the early modern period in Europe. And then obviously when we come into the European age, it's for the Muslim world, it's an age of colonialization and being dominated by European powers. So we will always be glancing across what's happening in both regions and how they're affecting each other, inshallah. But not more so today, because we're focusing just on a very small 30 years after the Prophet ﷺ. So looking at Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, I'm sure you're all very familiar with Abu Bakr. He's the closest friend and companion of the Prophet ﷺ. He's 2 years younger than the Prophet ﷺ. And even before Islam, they're best friends, good friends. I don't know if there's such thing as best friend, but they were very close friends even before Islam. Because they naturally, were inclined to each other's personality and so on. Abu Bakr is from the Bani Taym clan of Quraysh, the Bani Taym. So within the tribe of Quraysh, you have different clans, which are like extended families. Yeah. So the tribe become very, very big. Now, what do we mean by tribe? It's interesting as well to remember. The basic definition of a tribe, and any tribe, not just the Arab tribes, but any tribe, is that it all traces back to one common ancestor. That's what a tribe is, that all of the tribe, they all relate back to one common ancestor. So obviously as generations and generations go by, the tribe gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So within the tribe you get smaller units, clans, which are the smaller family units. Yeah. But ultimately, they all are related. Everyone in a tribe should be related by blood if it's a true tribe. And so for the Quraysh, does anyone know who was the ancestor for Quraysh? Who was the common ancestor? No, very good. Ibrahim, in a way, he is the common ancestor, but he's the common ancestor for maybe all Arabs that came from Ismail. That's going way, way back. It wasn't Adnan, but once again a good guess. It's Fehr. His name was Fehr, and he was also known as Quraysh. Yeah. So Fehr he was known. That's why it's called the tribe of Quraysh, because one of his other name was Quraysh, and he's also a common ancestor. But then if you go beyond him, that's when you go to like Adnan, Ismail. Ultimately, you go to Ismail alayhi salam and Ibrahim alayhi salam. Abu Bakr, his clan is not one of the really more powerful and wealthy clan, but it's a respected clan of Quraysh. And Abu Bakr himself, as an individual, is very highly respected amongst the Quraysh even before Islam. And he's a wealthy merchant. Yeah, so most of the Quraysh, obviously the traders, and Abu Bakr is a wealthy merchant. But after he becomes Muslim, he spends a lot of his wealth on freeing slaves and fi sabilillah. So we're going to go straight on to now, because of obviously this is a very summarized. We don't have much time to talk about his earlier life before he became the Khalifa, but I'm sure many of you are aware of many of the great virtues of Abu Bakr. He's one of the, he's mentioned in the Quran, not by name, but by very direct reference in the Quran. ثاني اثنين إذ هما في الغار, the second of the two when they were in the cave. Yeah, so that was on the Hijrah, right? When the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr were hiding in the cave, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed this ayah concerning that incident. ثاني اثنين إذ هما في الغار. The second of the two, the Prophet and Abu Bakr, when they were in the cave, إذ قال لصاحبه, when he said to his companion, do not be afraid, Allah is with us. And this is one of the proof of the Sunnis against the Shia. How can you say Abu Bakr is not a companion when the Quran calls him a companion? إذ قال لصاحبه, when he said to his companion that do not fear, Allah is with us. So he's one of the great blessing that he's mentioned in the Quran. There's only one Sahabi that is mentioned by name in the Quran. Only one Sahabi mentioned by name in the Quran. Anyone know who that is? Yeah. Zayd. Zayd ibn Haritha. Good. MashaAllah, we have a budding scholar here. I'm hoping. Inshallah. So Zayd is yeah. But many of the Sahaba are referred to, and the incidents that happened are referred to, but not by name. Only by name is Zayd. Because why? Because the Quran is a book for all ages. So even though many of the ayahs are revealed concerning incidents that happened at the time, the meaning of that and the teaching of that is not restricted to that incident. It's universal to the end of time. And that's why one of the reasons, Allah knows best, that specific names are not often mentioned. Anyway, so Abu Bakr is before the Prophet ﷺ passed away, he said to the Sahaba, Abu Bakr should lead the prayer. Yeah. So when the Prophet ﷺ was in his final illness, he was unable to get up to go and lead the prayer. Remember, his house was just connected to the masjid. So he said to them, tell Abu Bakr to lead the prayer. And so Sayyidina Abu Bakr would lead the prayer in the absence of the Prophet ﷺ. And on one occasion, I think it was Aisha and Hafsa, two of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, they came and they said to Rasulullah ﷺ, Ya Rasulullah, Abu Bakr is a soft-hearted man. When he leads the prayer, he would, weep and things like that. Tell Omar to lead the prayer. Tell Omar ibn al-Khattab to lead the prayer. Also, obviously, Omar is one of the greatest of the Sahaba. And the Prophet ﷺ refused. He insisted, no, Abu Bakr should lead the prayer, to the point where they were sort of insisting and trying to persuade him. And he said, no, you're Sawahib Yusuf. You're like the female companions of Yusuf. Just go tell Abu Bakr. So he insisted on Abu Bakr leading the prayer. Now when the Prophet ﷺ dies, the Sahaba were in shock. Yeah? It was a massive shock. So they couldn't fathom that, imagine if you're living amongst the Messenger of Allah ﷺ for all these years, and suddenly he's gone. They come one day, the news has gone around Medina, the Prophet ﷺ has died. So the Prophet ﷺ died in the house of Sayyidah Aisha. Right? During his last days, he was mainly with Sayyidah Aisha. It was his wife, obviously, the daughter of Abu Bakr. Now, when Omar, he got to the masjid first before Abu Bakr. And Omar, he basically went into denial. When you go into shock sometimes, you can go into denial. And he said, no, the Prophet ﷺ has not died. Yeah? And he started getting very angry. He said, if anyone says he's died, I'm going to chop off their head. Now, he took out his sword. And Sayyidina Omar is a very, obviously, fierce warrior. And one of the strongest of the Sahaba. So he, and obviously he was highly, highly respected. He's one of the closest of the Sahaba. I mean, according to the Sunnis, he, is in the order of the Khalifa. Those who are the highest in rank of the Sahaba is Abu Bakr, then Omar, then Uthman, then Ali. That's how we rank them as being the greatest of all the Sahaba. That's based on hadith, of course. The Prophet ﷺ said, for example, if the iman of Abu Bakr was on one scale and the iman of the rest of the ummah was on the other scale, the iman of Abu Bakr would be heavier. Yeah, so there's many hadiths, but we don't have time to go into. But Omar, he started saying, the Prophet ﷺ is not died, he's not died. He's gone to see Allah, like Musa went to see Allah, and he will come back to us. Yeah, and so then people got confused. The other Muslims, they were confused. They were like, what's going on? Maybe the Prophet ﷺ hasn't died, Omar is saying this. So this is all going on. People are in shock. They said that, some Sahaba just went like silent, they couldn't speak. Then Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he came into the masjid, and by the time, he was on the further side of Medina, so by the time he came, all of this is going on. Abu Bakr comes into the masjid and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes him firm at this time, critical time. So Abu Bakr, he goes into the house of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his house of his daughter Aisha, remember, and he kisses him on the forehead. He sees the body, and he kisses him on the forehead, and he says, Allah will not cause you to die twice. The death that was to come to you has come to you, and Allah will not cause you to die twice. And then he kisses him on the forehead, and he goes out into the masjid, and he sees Omar, what Omar is doing and saying. And Abu Bakr, he doesn't go up to Omar and start saying, stop saying this and you're wrong. He just calmly goes to another part of the masjid, the other side of the masjid. And he stands up and he makes a famous short speech. Yeah, and when people see Abu Bakr, they start gathering around Abu Bakr. And Abu Bakr says, as for those who worship the Prophet, know that he has died. And for those who worshipped Allah, let them know that he is always alive and will never die. And he recited an ayah of Quran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وما محمد إلا رسول قد خلت من قبله الرسل أفإن مات أو قتل انقلبتم على أعقابكم. Muhammad is nothing but a messenger. Many messengers have passed away before him. If he dies or he is killed, would you then turn back away from the deen, in other words? So the Muslims, they said, it was as if we never heard that ayah of Quran before. And Sayyidina Omar, at this point also, he's heard what Abu Bakr is saying. And he also then realizes that Rasulullah has passed away, and he basically collapsed in the masjid. So that was a great, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala strengthened Abu Bakr, in his iman and staying firm. Now, what happened next is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they're preparing for the janazah, they're preparing, and however, the question obviously comes, who's going to be the leader of the Muslims now? Yeah? And this is something we're going to look at in a little bit of detail, because obviously it's got many repercussions until today. Who's going to be, and obviously, particularly with the Shia-Sunni split that comes later. The Shia-Sunni split comes much later on, during the early Abbasid period, so it's not now, but they trace it back to, because what the Shia say is that Sayyidina Ali should have been the Khalifa straight after the Prophet ﷺ, and they sort of make it part of the deen. They make it part of the deen that the Khilafah is supposed to go to Ali. Obviously, the Sunnis, we don't accept that, and we believe Abu Bakr, Omar, Uthman, and then Ali are the all correct Khulafa. So what happened is basically, as the burial, the janazah is being prepared, etc., the news reaches Abu Bakr and Umar and these Sahaba. They're sitting in the masjid, near the masjid, and one of the Muhajirun come and they say to them that the Ansar, the people of Medina, the Muslims of Medina, are gathering together to choose a leader for the Muslims. Now remember, in Medina you have the Muslims of Medina, the Ansar, and you have the Muslims that came from Mecca, that done Hijrah, who are called Muhajirun. So the Muhajirun are a very small group, obviously. The majority of the Muslims in Medina, they're Ansar. So the Ansar are getting together to choose a leader. And this messenger, he was a Muhajir himself. He said, you should quickly choose a leader from the Muhajirun before they choose a leader from the Ansar. So you can see the Prophet ﷺ has now passed away. Anyway, so Omar says, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to choose our own leader while they're trying to choose. We'll go to our brothers, the Ansar, and we'll speak to them. Because we're one ummah, So you see almost like divisions almost starting. But Omar is fixing it, He's saying, no. We were united under Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We're not going to start choosing our own leader, let them and start fighting now. So he says to them, come with me. So whoever was with him, they went to and it was, who was with him? Abu Bakr was with him. Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah was with him. And some of the other Muhajirun. Now Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah is one of the great Sahabi. He's one of the 10 that are promised Jannah in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. And he's also special because in the hadith the Prophet ﷺ has said that every ummah has an ameen, and the ameen of this ummah is Abu Ubaidah, like a trustworthy person. Every ummah has one of these, and this is Abu Ubaidah. So Abu Ubaidah has a very special status in the Sahaba as well. So Omar, Abu Bakr, Abu Ubaidah, and some few other Muhajirun, they go to the place where the Ansar are meeting. And they go and they see that the Ansar have gathered and they're having a type of discussion and debate about who should be chosen to be the leader of the Muslims. Now, when they walk into the meeting, Omar, radiallahu anhu, he said, I had prepared a type of speech to give when we arrive at the meeting. But anyway, before he gave the speech, one of the leaders of the Ansar, he gave a short talk about why he believed that the leader of the Muslims should be from the people of Medina, from the people of the Ansar. And he gave good reasons, the virtues of the Ansar, this is the place of the Hijrah, etc., etc. But then Omar wanted to stand up and give the little speech that he had prepared, basically to say why the leader of the Muslim must be from the Quraysh, which are the Muhajirun. Because the Arabs will only accept a leader from the Quraysh. Yeah? Because remember, uniting the Arab tribes, remember we talked about this yesterday, these are tribal people. Bringing all of these tribes of Arabia together under one leader is no easy job. Yeah? No one's ever done it before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They're very independent type of people. They don't like to give their bay'ah. They won't bow to any. That's the way tribal people are. They have a type of very strong sense of autonomy. They will never bow to another human being. So to unite them under one leader is a very difficult thing. So the argument, they will only accept a leader from Quraysh, because the Quraysh, amongst all of Arabia, are seen as the Sadatul Arab, the chiefs of the Arabs. So anyway, so Umar said, I had this prepared talk. And I was about to stand up, but Abu Bakr stood up first. And he told me, just wait. And Abu Bakr stood up. And Umar said, everything I prepared to say, Abu Bakr said it, and he said it better. So Abu Bakr then said to the Ansar, he said, what you have said is true about your virtues and about the Ansar and everything, but the Arabs will never accept a leader from other than the Quraysh. And he gave other reasons of the excellence of the Muhajirun as well, the people of the Quraysh. So then the debate started becoming a little bit heated, right? One of the people stood up and they said, look, we'll have one leader from our side, one leader from your side, one from the Ansar, one from the Quraysh. We'll have two leaders, in other words. Other people start saying, how can you have two leaders? One body can't have two heads, which is obviously true as well. So people, according to the description that is given by Sayyidina Omar, he said they started getting noisy, people started standing up, people started shouting. The things will seem to be getting a bit out of control. At this point, um, Abu Bakr, he said, look, he raised his voice, he said, I give you one of these two people. Yeah? Omar or Abu Ubaidah. He took their hand, one in one hand and one hand. He said to them, look, I give you either of these, Omar or Abu Ubaidah. These are the two people that were very, close to the Prophet ﷺ. Take bay'ah with either of them. Take either of them as your leader, in other words. It was at this point when Omar said, suddenly, it became so clear to me. How could we even think of, sorry, it's just, how could we think of putting ourselves in front of Abu Bakr, It's when Abu Bakr, pulled his hand forward, take allegiance with him. He said, then it suddenly became clear, how could we, any of us, think of putting ourselves in front of Sayyidina Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu. So, because he's the one, the Prophet ﷺ, he insisted on him leading the prayer. Have we forgotten all these things about Abu Bakr? So then, excuse me, I think that's because I'm fasting, I'm going to get a little bit emotional. So Omar says, so then Omar said, he pulled the hand of Abu Bakr. And he said, he pledged allegiance to Abu Bakr, He pledged allegiance to Abu Bakr. And when the other Muslims, they see that, they all realize, then they all took bay'ah with Abu Bakr. And so that's how the bay'ah took place. In the future, when Omar reflected back on it, he said it was a spontaneous thing. It was unplanned. Things just happened on the spot. Like, we didn't plan this. No one said, we're going to make Abu Bakr the Khalifa or anything like that. It was spontaneous. It was a situation that was getting out of control. And Abu Bakr himself said, I accepted that at that time because I didn't want the division amongst the Ummah. I feared that the Ummah would divide. That's why Abu Bakr accepted being the Khalifa. Now, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu is only Khalifa for 2 years. Yeah? He's only Khalifa for 2 years before he passes away. And some people said he died of a broken heart, after the Prophet ﷺ left. Abu Bakr couldn't live for long because he was so close to the Prophet ﷺ. But he was Khalifa for 2 years. And those 2 years were critical years for the early Ummah. If it wasn't, for Abu Bakr, for those 2 years, things, Allah knows best what would have happened. Things could have gone very wrong in that very critical period, the early history, the early first 2 years after the Prophet ﷺ. There were a lot of great challenges that came about for the Ummah. And Abu Bakr led them in a firm and uncompromising iman. So he got them through that very difficult period, the first 2 years after the Prophet ﷺ. You got to imagine you're living in a place where there's a prophet. If there's any problem, any questions, any disputes, you always know where you can get an answer. You go to the Prophet ﷺ, you get the answer. If he give it from himself or he gives it from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now imagine the Prophet is now not there. So you don't have that wahi, the revelation. They said there was a famous, that when Abu Bakr and Umar, they went to visit Halima, the wetness of the Prophet ﷺ after he passed away. She was still alive. And they found her to be weeping. And they thought she was weeping because the Prophet ﷺ has died. But she said, I weep because the wahi has been stopped. The revelation has stopped. This is an amazing thing, when you're living with a person who receives revelation from the heaven. This is now stopped. So, the human nature is that we have differences of opinion. And Sahaba, they are human beings, Sometimes we put the Sahaba on a very, very high level of almost, we think of them as infallible, like the prophets. The prophets, they're infallible. They don't commit sin according to the Sunni belief. But the Sahaba, they're not prophets. So we have to recognize that, despite their great level, high level of spiritual, they are still human beings. And when we talk about what happened during the Khulafa Rashidun, we have to remember this, And the thing to remember is whenever you see something from the Sahaba that you feel, is maybe not perfect, we have to remember this is because only the Messenger of Allah is perfect, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Yeah? Only the Messenger of Allah, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, is perfect. So everything else is always to show his perfection. The same like the Quran is the only perfect book. So every other book written by any scholar, no matter how great the scholar, even the greatest scholars like Imam al-Ghazali and others, all of their books, they have some things in there that other scholars have said, no, this is not correct. Or with respect, we do not agree with this thing or that thing. Because only the book of Allah is perfect. Imam al-Shafi'i, rahimahullah, is famously, when he wrote one of his great works, the Risala, on which was a foundational book of Usul al-Fiqh, I think he said, I revised it 40 times. I went through it 40 times to make corrections and improvements. And after 40, I realized that only the book of Allah is perfect. So you have to just publish, But, so bear that in mind, that when we talk about the Sahaba and some of the differences they had, is because you no longer have the revelation to guide you, So it's human nature, ijtihad, to have different opinions. And different Sahaba did have major different opinions about different things. But at the end of the day, they respected each other's difference of opinion. Even when Muawiyah was fighting against Sayyidina Ali, as we'll see tomorrow inshallah, he still respected Ali. He would send people to go and ask him questions about Aqidah or fiqh. Yeah? Because he respected his knowledge. So even though they had a difference in certain political issue, they still respected each other, as a Sahabi, etc. So what happened during the 2 years of Sayyidina Abu Bakr? These are 4 of the main issues that we can talk about. One was the sending out of the army of Usama. The second was the battle against the apostates, which was a major preoccupation. And then you had the apostates and those who refused to pay zakat. And one of the greatest of the apostates was Musaylima, the liar, the kadhab. And finally, the gathering of the Quran. So we'll touch upon these issues briefly. So when the Prophet ﷺ has passed away, when Abu Bakr has now become Khalifa, now before the Prophet ﷺ passed away, he was sending out an army against the Romans. Okay? And the army was led by Usama ibn Zayd. Yeah, remember Zayd, the one who's mentioned in the Quran? His son was Usama. And Zayd is, he was the adopted son of the Prophet ﷺ. So Usama is like his adopted grandson. So Usama is someone who's very, very close to the Prophet ﷺ, very beloved to him. But Usama was young, he was only 18 or so at the time. And when the Prophet ﷺ appointed him, obviously people accepted it because the Prophet ﷺ has appointed him as a leader of this army. But after the Prophet ﷺ has passed away, people start questioning, like, he's so young, should he be leading the army? Also, now news is coming into Medina that many of the Arab tribes are leaving Islam. They're leaving the Bay'ah. Remember, this is once again a tribal thing. If you live amongst tribal societies, they always choose a leader. And when that leader dies, they have to get together to choose the next leader. It's not automatic, like it goes to your son or anything like that. And once again, it's to do with survival. Remember we talked about survival. These tribal people, they normally live in deserts and these places where they're on the edge of existence. Now to survive as a tribe, that you need to find water, you need food, you need to move around. You need to have good leadership. Yeah? You can't afford to have a bad leader. So that's why in the tribal system, when one leader dies, they have to get together and choose who they consider to be the best leader, because it's literally for their survival. They need good leader. And the son of the previous leader may be not a good leader. And the nature of things is, just because someone's born a child of another person, it doesn't mean they're going to follow them in all of their qualities. So this is why, tribal people, they can't afford to have a hereditary. So you can't have someone like incompetent, like Boris Johnson leading you. If you're a settled civilization, you can afford to have incompetent leaders because it doesn't affect, it's not, your survival is not critical on that. So it's the nature of things. When the Prophet ﷺ has now died, many of these Arab tribes are saying, okay, we pledge allegiance to him, but doesn't mean automatically we pledge allegiance to Abu Bakr. So news is coming into Medina that some tribes, they're still Muslim, but they're refusing to send zakat to Medina. They said, we used to send zakat to the Prophet ﷺ, but we're not going to send it to Abu Bakr. We're still Muslim, we're still doing our salah, but we're going to keep our own zakat. Some other tribes were leaving Islam altogether. The Prophet ﷺ is gone now, we're no longer interested. We're going back to our Jahiliyyah and worshipping idols and so on. So all of this news is coming into Medina. The army that's going towards, is just it hasn't got very far. When they hear the news that the Prophet ﷺ has passed away, they stop where they are, a short distance away from Medina, and they say, let's wait for the news, what's the instruction from Abu Bakr. So some of the Sahaba that were close to Abu Bakr, like Omar and others, they advised Abu Bakr, call back the army of Osama. The situation is becoming a bit critical. We don't know what's going to happen. These tribes are leaving Islam, they're becoming apostate. We might have to deal with them. So we need all of the people that we got, So call back, these are some of our best warriors, we're sending them to fight the Romans. We can't be fighting the Romans when we got problem around the Arab tribes. Abu Bakr said no. Abu Bakr said no. Even though everyone was trying to persuade him, he said, no, I will not reverse the order that was given by the Prophet ﷺ. One of the last orders he gave before he passed away, I'm not going to reverse that order. The army should go. So the army went. And the wisdom that came out of that, as Allah plans better than other planners, right? Many of the Arab tribes around Medina, when they saw that the army is going, they started saying, wow, these Muslims must be super confident. They must be super strong. They're not even worried about these little rebellions and stuff. They're sending an army against the Romans. So some of them actually then came back into, encouraged them to come back into obedience to Medina. So psychologically, it had a massive effect that was, unplanned. And also the army did not encounter the Romans, and it eventually came back to Medina intact. So that was one of the mawqif of Abu Bakr. Now secondly, some of the Sahaba now, they're advising Abu Bakr. They said to him, look, we've got to deal with these tribes that are apostatizing from Islam. Obviously, it's a very strict rule in Islam. If you've come into Islam, you can't just leave Islam. It's called apostasy. And there's a penalty with that. So you have to fight these people. So what Omar and some other Sahaba said to Abu Bakr, look, we'll fight those that have apostatized from Islam. But the ones that are still staying in Islam but they're refusing to send zakat, let's be a bit lenient with them, and we should not fight them. Just leave them, let them keep their zakat. Once again, Abu Bakr was absolutely firm, and Allah strengthened him. He said, no. By Allah, even one penny, I'm just paraphrasing my own word, obviously he didn't say penny, but he said even one dinar or dirham that they used to send to the Messenger of Allah, if they don't send it, I will go and fight them. So he was prepared to take the sword to establish Islam and the rulings of Islam. And so he then sent out, I believe it was 13 armies. Yeah, Abu Bakr arranged 13 armies, each with a separate commander, and he sent them against the different parts of Arabia, against all of these tribes, the ones that were refusing to pay zakat and the ones that apostatized. And over those 2 years, all of those armies were successful. And obviously we don't have time to go into a lot of those amazing stories of the battles that were fought against all of these different tribes. But slowly, over those 2 years, all of the tribes came back to Islam. One of the major battles that we'll just touch upon was against Musaylima al-Kadhab, which was probably the greatest threat militarily. So Musaylima is known as Musaylima al-Kadhab, the great liar. He was a false prophet. He claimed to be a prophet. He actually claimed to be a prophet during the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. He was the leader, one of the chief of a very major tribe of the Arabs called the Banu Hanifa. And the Banu Hanifa were one of the massive tribe from the Najd area, the eastern area of Arabia. And they were partly nomadic, so some of them were nomads, and some of them were settled in a town called Yamama. So they had a town in the Najd called Yamama. And he was one of their chiefs. Now, during the life of the Prophet ﷺ, obviously the Prophet ﷺ rejected his, because he sent a letter to Prophet ﷺ in Medina, and he said to him, he said to Muhammad, the messenger of Allah, from Musaylima, the messenger of Allah. And he said, let Arabia be divided, half for you, half for me. Yeah? And obviously the Prophet ﷺ sent back a letter to him saying, from the messenger of Allah, Muhammad, to Musaylima al-Kadhab, to Musaylima the liar, and rejected him obviously as a prophet. But Abu Bakr sent against him, initially the first army that went against Musaylima was led by Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl. Now Ikrimah is the son of Abu Jahl. Yeah? So people may be surprised. Abu Jahl obviously is one of the great enemies of Islam. And Abu Jahl was killed in the Battle of Badr. But his son Ikrimah became a great Muslim. Eventually he became Muslim after Mecca was taken and so on. And he's now leading the army, against Musaylima. Now, you might think, why would Abu Bakr put Ikrimah in charge of, he's the son of Abu Jahl, why would you put him in charge of an army, for Sahaba? But this is the wisdom of these people, once again it goes to leadership, The most pious person is not always the best military leader, military commander. So the most pious person is not the best political leader as well, That's just a fact of life. People different skills. Ikrimah is one of the noble chiefs of Quraysh. He's someone that the people respect from their tribal custom and thing. He's a chief. And he's a brave warrior. He's a great warrior. So he's put as This is something we often forget, especially because we don't have a Muslim. We don't really have Muslim leadership, Since basically the collapse of the Ottoman Caliphate, there's no Muslim leadership. So people think, for example, the most knowledgeable person should be the leader, like So they make scholars into leaders. But often the scholars are not the best suited to be leaders of a community or someone, because to be a scholar is a different skill set to being leading a community. Often, the best scholars are normally the most sort of like these professor types who are, a little bit sort of Asperger's and very bookish type of people. They don't necessarily make the best, they don't have the best people skills, if I can put it that way. So it's something, just a wisdom we need to bear in mind. It comes about because we no longer have, so it tends to be the scholars take over leadership of communities because we don't no longer have Muslim leadership. But that's just a sort of a side effect in a way. You see that in the Jewish history as well, because the Jews for centuries and centuries, they never had political leadership. They were always living in other people's, they never had their own. So their communities were always ruled by the rabbis, the scholars of their communities, used to lead them. So this tends to happen when you don't have an actual political leadership. Anyway, so Ikrimah is facing the army of Musaylima. Musaylima's army is huge. We're talking about 40,000 or something like that. Like, this is a very big tribe, Banu Hanifa. Yeah. And Ikrimah, obviously, each time these battles, the Muslims are vastly outnumbered anyway. But Abu Bakr, he sent a message to Ikrimah. He said, don't engage the enemy until Khalid joins you. So Khalid ibn al-Walid obviously is one of the other commander of one of those 13 armies. And Khalid ibn al-Walid has been having great success amongst the other battles. So Abu Bakr then says to Khalid, go to Ikrimah, join Ikrimah to fight Musaylima, because this is a big problem we have with Musaylima. So Khalid is now on his way to there. And Ikrimah, however, is feeling very enthusiastic because he's hearing about all the successes of Khalid, and other people are having these great, glorious victories and battles. So Ikrimah says, no, we're going to go for this, yeah? I mean, mashallah, he's a Muslim, he's full of iman at this time, and victory is from Allah. So he doesn't wait for Khalid and he launches attack against Musaylima. And they're defeated on that first day. So Ikrimah's army is defeated by the Banu Hanifa. It's quite a setback. So anyway, then they wait for Khalid. Khalid joins them shortly after that with his army. And Abu Bakr has put Khalid in overall command of those armies. Another interesting thing that happens then, on the first day, what Khalid does, and this is once again going back to, just to teach us some wisdoms from these things as well. Khalid, he said, because he noticed that the army is arranged according to the different clans and tribes. The Muslim army, but people, they're sort of bunching around their own tribes and their own clans. Yeah, just naturally, their own. And he said, no, mix up, just spread the soldiers, just all mix up. We're all Muslim now, we're all equal. We don't have that tribe and clan and these things anymore. Yeah, it doesn't matter if you're Quraysh or Ansar or whatever you are. And then they go into the battle the next day with all mixed up. And once again, the Banu Hanifa are successful and the Muslims are pushed back. So Khalid is a little bit, because Khalid is very, very, very strong iman that victory, Allah gives victory to the believers. He doesn't believe that you can ever be defeated. Even if it's one Muslim against 1,000, he would never accept that you can be defeated. So he's thinking that night, what went wrong? And then the next day he said, look, go back to how you were before, how you want to, in your own clans and your own little tribes, And that day they get victory, the Muslims get victory. So just show what the wisdom of that shows us, that Islam doesn't come to negate any type of tribe, clan, what we call today nationality, for example, right? This is why I always say personally, people always say, oh, why do you have to have Somali masjid, Pakistani masjid, Algerian masjid? My personal take on that is fine. As long as I'm a Pakistani, I can walk into Somali masjid, I feel welcome. I don't see any problem with that. It's a nature of human beings to sort of have this kinship. So when you're in the battle, if that's your nephew next to your cousin, you're going to fight a bit more fiercely. Maybe you shouldn't, but that's the nature of human nature. Islam recognizes that. When the Prophet ﷺ was going into Mecca, the Fath Makkah, if you remember, the army was arranged according to the different tribes. They're all Muslim, but they had their different tribes. Yeah? The Prophet ﷺ maintained that because Islam recognizes that. It gives you a type of extra solidarity and helping one another, and there's nothing wrong with that, as long as, and in my experience, I'm sure all of you have experienced this, you normally feel more welcome when you go into another masjid. You know? If say an Algerian comes here, it's a Pakistani masjid, you go out of your way to make them feel more welcome than they would in their own masjid. So personally, I don't think, if it's done in a healthy way, there's nothing at all wrong with that, and it can be. So that's what happened, and then the Muslims were successful. It's known as the Battle of Yamama. It's one of the great battles, and Khalid, Musaylama is killed by who? Who's he killed by? Come on, one of you youngsters must know. Musaylama is killed by Wahshi. Wahshi. If people remember, Wahshi is the one who killed Sayyidina Hamza, radiallahu anhu, the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ. So Wahshi, when he was not Muslim, he killed Hamza, the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ, one of the most beloved people to him. But later he became Muslim. And these are all wisdoms that Allah is teaching us about things. You know, that when he became Muslim, all his sins are forgiven. He's done one of the greatest things that really affected and really was affecting to the Prophet ﷺ. But now he's killed one of the great enemies of Islam. Yeah? So anyway, one of the other things that happened in this battle was a fierce battle that went over several days. Many Hafiz of Quran were killed during this battle. Many of the Huffaz who had memorized Quran. So this is why Omar went to Abu Bakr in Medina and he said, look, in these battles, many of our Huffaz are being killed. And I fear that we may lose the Quran, if this continues. So he said to Abu Bakr, collect the Quran together in the entirety, get the whole Quran together, because until that time, it had been written down, but it was scattered around. Different surahs were written down in different places. No one had put it together as one book. And Abu Bakr said, how can I do something that the Rasulullah ﷺ didn't do? You're telling me to do, in other words, an innovation that was not done by the Prophet ﷺ. But Umar said to him, no, I'm convinced this is the right thing. And he continued to persuade him until Abu Bakr said, my heart became expanded. In other words, I realized that this is a good thing to do. And once again, it shows us that just because something was not done by the Prophet ﷺ doesn't mean it's not a good thing to do. Right? So then Abu Bakr agreed. And then Abu Bakr, he asked Zayd ibn Thabit, who was one of the great knowledge of the Quran. He said to him, you go and you collect the written Quran. People had memorized it, but it was also written during the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. He said, collect the written ones and let's put it together as a book. And Zayd ibn Thabit initially, he said, how can you tell me to do something that the Rasulullah ﷺ didn't do? And once again, then they persuaded him until he became convinced that this is a good thing to do. And then that was when the Quran was collected together for the first time in one book. One of the things that Sayyidina Abu Bakr did before he died is he appointed the Khalifa to come after him. So this is also important because, as I said, the question of political leadership, how do you choose who's going to be your leader? What happened before Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu died, he took shura, he took a consultation amongst the leading companions, and he decided to appoint Omar radiallahu anhu as Khalifa after him. So, in other words, one Khalifa can appoint the next one before he dies. But obviously it should be done through shura, amruhum shura bainahum. It says in the Quran, the affair of the Muslims is done through shura, consultation. Um, so some of the Sahaba, they said to Abu Bakr, how can you put Umar, how can you make Umar the leader? He's very strict. Everyone knows how strict he is. So Abu Bakr said that Umar's strictness was there because of my softness. Because Abu Bakr was soft, so he said Umar would be strict to balance it out. When the weight of the caliphate is over his shoulders, he will remain no longer strict. If I will be asked by Allah, to whom have I appointed my successor, I will tell him that I have appointed the best man among your people. So Sayyidina Abu Bakr was confident, that Umar was the best person. And he said, I'm confident, I will answer back to Allah. We will see later, before Umar died, he didn't appoint someone. Yeah, so before Umar died, he appointed 6 people. He said, from you 6, you have to choose a leader. So the reason why Umar, he did that was because he was afraid that, the responsibility will be coming back to me on my grave. If I appoint one of them, whatever happens after me, it was going to come back to me. So that was his way of dealing with that. So remember we said the sunnah of the Khulafa Rashidun is also part of our deen. So this is also part of our fiqh, that how do we choose leaders, etc. We saw that the election of Abu Bakr was spontaneous. So it was just done by the people spontaneously. The other thing I forgot to mention from the previous slide was that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Al-yawm akmaltu lakum deenakum. This day I have completed for you your deen. The deen is completed. Islam is completed. Only after Islam is completed that the Prophet ﷺ is taken away. And that's very clear from the Quran, So what that tells us actually is that it's not part of the deen how to choose or elect a leader. It's not part of the deen. If it was part of the deen, we would have had clear instructions in the Quran or the Hadith. The Prophet ﷺ left us without choosing a leader and without telling us how to choose a leader. You understand? And it's not because it was forgotten or it was deficient. It's because that's not part. In other words, that area of fiqh is open. Yeah, people may choose leaders through different means. In other words, now from the Khulafa al-Rashidun, we have a precedent of 3 different means of choosing a leader. Yeah? One is the way Abu Bakr and later on Ali are chosen, which is basically the leaders of the society taking bay'ah with them. The second one is the Khalifa, before he dies, he does shura and he chooses someone. This is in some ways the safest way in terms of political unrest and stability, because it means there will be a smooth transition of power. Because when we study history, this is one of the things we see often. A lot of problems happen when one leader dies, and then the succession, that's when a lot of fighting and things can happen. And then the third precedent is the one of Omar, where he select a panel of 6 people. And he said from the 6, they have to decide within 3 days. And he literally said, lock them in a room and don't let them out until they decide. So these are the different precedents we have, but I feel that it's quite open. And I think that the wisdom of that is because human societies are very different as well. You have some societies are little tribes, some are big nations, empires. People may have different ways of selecting their leaders. So anyway, that's the thing. Now, obviously, Shia, they believe that Sayyidina Ali was appointed to be the Khalifa, but Abu Bakr and Omar and Uthman, they took his place unrightfully. Yeah? And that's their belief. And the funny thing with the Shia is that they actually follow pretty much very similar hadith and things that we follow, right? In the sense that in the early period, there was no Sunni and Shia in this time, you know. So the hadith are the hadith. Yeah? So their proofs are taken from some of the hadith that we also accept, but they put a different interpretation on it. Yeah? So for example, there's a hadith that we Sunnis have in our books, in which before the Prophet ﷺ passed away in his final illness, one day he was saying, there were some people in the room, some Sahaba, Omar, and some of the wife of the Prophet ﷺ were there, and he was saying, he's saying to them, bring me a pen. I will write down for you everything, so you'll never go astray after this. Yeah, I will tell you something to write down, so you will never go astray after this. Now Omar in the room, he realized that this is the Prophet ﷺ is testing them. He's testing them because we have the Quran. The Quran is complete now at this time. So Omar radiallahu anhu, he says, Ya Rasulullah, it's enough for us is the book of Allah. And the Prophet ﷺ was silent. He was happy with the answer. Yeah, because he was testing them, you know. Are they going to be, they have got the Quran. Now the Shia, they say, oh, see, the Prophet, he wanted to write down that Ali is going to be his successor, but Omar stopped him. Yeah, so that's the type of thing where we have, it's the same hadith, but they're looking at it they try to bring some other different meaning out of it that wasn't there. You know, well, that's what we believe, because obviously I'm Sunni, and that's why I believe that. And they have some other sort of, hadith that we accept as well, like the Prophet ﷺ said to Sayyidina Ali, you are to me like Harun was to Musa, you know, when he left him in Medina, in charge of Medina. So they say, oh, look, that's a clear proof, you know, but it was just showing the high status of Sayyidina Ali, you know. Anyway, so during the time of Sayyidina Omar, we have this massive expansion of Islam, which Sayyidina Omar is Khalifa for 10 years, right? So it's quite a long time compared to Abu Bakr. He's Khalifa for 10 years. And during that time, Islam becomes the greatest power in the world, superpower in the world, during his lifetime, during that 10 years. 3/4 of the, let's get the highlighter there. 3/4, laser point. 3/4 of the Eastern Roman Empire is taken over by the Muslims. So all of this North Africa, what today we call the Middle East, but in those days it was called Syria. The Romans called it Syria and Palestine. And all the way up, very, very up, you know, these are borders of Turkey, and these are countries like Armenia, Azerbaijan nowadays, yeah? So all this land was taken from the Roman Empire. So the Romans retreated to here, what is today Turkey, and part of their empire was in Greece here, and the capital Constantinople here. So the Romans have retreated to this region here. The Muslims have taken over the entire Persian Empire here on the east. So you're going all the way into the borders of, you know, today's Afghanistan, and going right up into Central Asian areas as well. So very huge, and don't forget the whole of Arabia is also, the Romans and the Persians, they never had Arabia. So the Muslim Empire, we call it Caliphate or Dar al-Islam. empire is not really the right word for the Khulafa Rashidun, but the Muslim Caliphate is now much larger than the Romans ever were or the Persians ever were, right? It's almost double the size of them. And so it's literally, a large part of the civilized world, what we call civilized world, has come under Islam very quickly. Yeah, within 10 years now. This is within 10 years, 12 years after the Prophet ﷺ. Um, these are the list of what they called the names of the countries today. Obviously, in those days, they had different names. These are the countries that are taken. This is Emperor Heraclius. So he's the emperor of the Romans during this time when the Muslims are taking over most of the... Remember, he was the one who killed Kisra in the last class. But now most of his empire has been taken over by the Muslim forces. But he survives in Constantinople. These are the major battles that take place against the Romans. Obviously, just to be aware of them. Now, the Battle of Yarmouk is the decisive battle. Yeah, the Battle of Yarmouk, that's in bold, in highlight. And this is the sort of the greatest battle against the Romans, and this is the turning point. This is probably one of the, or not probably, this is one of the greatest battles in world history, because this is when the Romans they send all of their forces against the Muslims to stop the Muslims. And it's a turning point, After that, the Romans just basically retreat from the whole region. So before that, there's all these other smaller battles where the Muslims are generally successful in each one. But the Battle of Yarmouk we'll just focus on for a few minutes, because these are the type of battles we should all be aware of as Muslims, and our children, growing up, we should be teaching them. Like, people know about the Battle of Britain or the Second World War, but these are the great battles of our history that have literally changed world history, And the Battle of Yarmouk took place near the river Yarmouk. Sorry, the next slide. See, this is the actual region. You can see there's a plaque there today, Nahar al-Yarmouk, the river of Yarmouk. So it took place in this valley where you have got this river Yarmouk. It's in Syria, I believe now. Syria or Jordan, around that region. And the commander of the Muslim army was Abu Ubaidah. Remember we mentioned Abu Ubaidah, the Amin of this ummah. He was a commander of the Muslim army there that was gathering. Now the Muslims had about 30,000, so it's quite a large for one of the Muslim army. But the Romans came with around about 100,000. There's different estimates on their number, but it's approximately around 100,000, because Heraclius had basically got his commanders from all over the empire, because the Muslims were making massive, obviously, advances into their territory. And it was arranged under 5 different armies. He had put it under 5 different princes. And Heraclius himself was not present, though. So and there's it may be, we don't know, but it may be because he knew, that he knew the signs, of the final prophet and things like that. So, but he'd send all of his forces, He said, we have to, this is the decisive, we have to stop the Muslims. So you've got a huge Roman army, and when the news got back to Medina, that the type of army that the Romans have sent, there was a lot of, the Sahaba were very, some of them were weeping, saying, we wish we were there to help our Muslim brothers, and however, anyway, Abu Ubaidah is the commander of the Muslim, but then Sayyidina Abu Bakr, when they hear about the size of the Roman army, once again, Sayyidina Abu Bakr, he sends Khalid. Khalid's army at the time is going towards the Persians. But Abu Bakr says to Khalid, go and join Abu Ubaidah because the Romans have sent against us everything. So Khalid, and this is it's a famous how he crossed the Syrian desert in a miraculous way, in a way that's never been done before, and they were basically, because that desert was uncrossable, by an army, and he said, but it's a direct route, and we need to get to Abu Ubaidah. So they loaded up camels. They made the camels drink copious amounts of water. Many camels. So the camels were like full of water. And while they were crossing the desert, they would slit them open and get the water. So they literally made the camels carry the water out. It says in their humps, but I'm not sure if that's if they. I think they do store water in their humps, do they? Yeah. So they would cut the humps and they would take the water. So anyway, they made it in a very short time, in a few days, and they joined Abu Ubaidah. Now Abu Bakr also had given instructions to Khalid. No, he sent a messenger to Abu Ubaidah. He said, Khalid is coming to join you. When he comes, make him the overall commander of the army. So Abu Ubaidah has received the letter. Anyway, so it shows the wisdom of once again, Abu Ubaidah is clearly, in terms of the rank of Sahaba, Abu Ubaidah is from the top. Khalid is a great Sahabi, but he's not from that. But in terms of military command, Khalid is a better military commander. So anyway, so the battle takes place. It's a very fierce battle. It goes over, in many reports, 5 days. One of the day of the battle was known as the day of losing one eye. The day of losing one eye. Because so many arrows, the Romans were shooting so many arrows, the sky was full of arrows. And many of the Sahaba lost an eye, from the arrows, including Abu Sufyan. If you remember Abu Sufyan, he's in this battle. Yeah, Abu Sufyan, remember, he's one of the enemies of Prophet ﷺ. But once again, like Ikram, he's become Muslim. He's now in this battle against the Romans. He loses one eye in this battle. He's one of those people that lost one eye. It's an amazing battle. If people want to read in a lot of detail, there is an English translation of Al-Waqidi called The Conquest of Sham, which is in English now. And they go into great detail of this battle, which I really recommend. So many heroic things happened, etc. There was one time when the Muslims they were fleeing from the battlefield. Many of them started fleeing, and the Romans were coming forward. And the Muslim women were at the camp, in the camps at the back. And the Muslim women came out and start fighting the Romans. Why? To encourage the men to come back to the battlefield. So when the men, they're running, they saw the women are fighting, they then turned back out of almost like shame. So many of them then came back. But anyway, eventually, the Muslims are victorious, and the Romans are utterly defeated. Some of the Romans had tied themselves up in chains. Some of the gladiators, they had tied themselves up in chains so that they cannot run. So they said this is the final battle. So it was a very, very fierce battle, But eventually the Romans are defeated, they start fleeing, and many of them get drowned in the river in their attempt to escape. So that's like the turning point battle, yeah? After that, most of that region falls to the Muslims, including Jerusalem. A couple of years later, obviously Jerusalem is in the nearby vicinity. Obviously now the conquest of Jerusalem is a special thing, so we're just going to focus on that for a couple of minutes as well. When the Muslim army has now surrounded Jerusalem, besieging Jerusalem, the Christians want to surrender. The Romans, they want to surrender. Because the Roman Empire had become Christian, obviously in about 300 CE. the Emperor Constantine had become Christian, so all of the Roman Empire had become Christian long before Islam. So the Roman Christians, they are wanting to surrender, but the patriarch of the city, the patriarch is like the religious leader of Jerusalem, of the Christians, he sent a message to the Muslims. He said, we will only give the keys to the city if your Khalifa comes in person. Your leader comes in person, because Omar is in Medina. Throughout this time, Omar has never left Medina. This is one of the great, amazing thing about these conquests as well, that the Muslims are taking all these, and some of the greatest Sahaba, they're still in Medina. Even Sayyidina Ali is in Medina. Omar doesn't let him go. He wants to keep him close. Uthman, these people, they're in Medina. They're like the backup. They didn't even need to use the backup, Before the Battle of Yarmouk, when the message came to Medina that the Romans have sent, Sayyidina Ali was there. He said, look, tell Abu Bakr and those that Allah is with them. And if they are defeated, if they're martyred, don't worry. Amir al-Mu'mineen will send me to deal with these people. So the backup is there in Medina, but it's not even needed, yeah? But because of the special significance of Jerusalem, obviously it's the place of the Isra, yeah? And it's a place that was blessed throughout. Allah blessed that land from ancient times, just like Mecca was blessed from ancient times. If you look at the Quran, Subhanallah asra bi'abdihi layla min al-masjid al-haram ila al-masjid al-aqsa, and Allah describes it al-ard allati barakna hawlahu. It is a land that we have blessed, the surroundings, not just the masjid itself, the masjid area, but even the land surrounding is blessed. That the whole land is blessed. And obviously it was the first Qibla of the Muslims, don't forget. Yeah, it was the first Qibla. The Muslims used to turn to Jerusalem to pray, so it's very significant for the Sahaba. This is a place that they very much respect, and it's a very holy place. So Omar said, yes, I'll come. So Omar comes from Medina to Jerusalem, and they say that he came with one slave and one camel. Sayyidina Omar at this time, he's the leader of the greatest superpower in the world. But he's still living a very, very simple life. Sayyidina Umar often used to weep and say, all these riches have been opened up to us, and I fear that I will not stay on the path of my two companions, the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr. So he maintained a very simple life, even though he didn't take the money, that was coming into Medina. He took on a very, very small salary to keep himself alive and his family. So he would wear thobe with patches on there, if he had the patches. And they say he used to have two shirts, one clean and one dirty, He was very, very simple. They said once the Romans sent a delegation to Medina to visit, and they were coming into Medina, these Roman delegation. They were looking around, where's the big palace? They were like, this must be some great leader, some great emperor that's taking over the whole world. And they were looking, they can't see any big palaces or anything, just simple houses. So they go to someone, they say, where's your leader? And I said, there he is over there. And he's sitting under a palm tree, wearing a simple shirt, with patches on it. So Umar is coming to Jerusalem with one slave and one camel, and they're taking it in turns to ride on the camel. So when they're coming close to Jerusalem, the people who are waiting for them, they see the two people coming, one riding the camel, one walking. They thought the slave is the Khalifa because he's riding on the camel. And only when they came, then they told him, no, he's the Khalifa, the one walking. So this just shows the level of these people. So anyway, said Omar, he takes the key to Jerusalem, and the Sahaba, they enter into Jerusalem. And they said in the biographies, they said, when they went into the city, the Sahaba, they're walking with their eyes lowered, Christian women are coming out on the rooftops to see this army coming in, but the Sahaba, they have their eyes lowered not to look at the women, and they then comes to time for prayer. So they say, where do we pray? The patriarch is showing them, this is the big church. Some of the Sahaba said, we should pray in the church. Let's take over the church, make it into a masjid. Sayyidina Omar said, no, we don't take over churches. So they prayed close by. And if you go there, I went recently, before obviously the trouble started and everything. People might have seen the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It's the most holy church in the whole of Christianity, because they believe this is the place where Jesus was resurrected. So it's called the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So Sayyidina Umar refused to take over that church, and he prayed nearby. So until today, then later on, the Muslims, they built a masjid there. It's called Masjid Umar. So it's there until today. You can go and pray there. It's very sad, because now obviously it's in the hands of non-Muslim. Then there's no signs, nothing. You can't find it unless you ask the local people. And then they tell you. But it's a proper big masjid. And so it also shows, how the Sahaba are teaching us. When you take these places, you leave people's place of worship. The Ahlul Kitab, the Christian, we don't need to take over their churches and everything. And he even said that, I don't want it to become a sunnah, I don't want it to become a precedent that we take over these places of worship. And then they said, where is the haram? Where's the area, the sacred area? Because the Jews already knew of this, because they used to have their holy place there, the temple it was called Temple of Suleiman. So they told them where the place is. And when they got there, they found out that it had been neglected, because the Roman Christians had no interest in that. The Jews used to venerate it as the holy place, where their temple is. But the Christians, because the Christians believe that all the old religion is gone, the Jewish religion is gone, we've got a new teaching now. They didn't venerate that place, so it had been just neglected and used even for throwing rubbish and things like that. So the Sahaba literally cleared up the area. They cleared it up to make it, because they recognized it as the place of the Mi'raj and the Isra. And it's mentioned in the Quran, Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. The Quran actually calls it Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. Yeah, so it's that area is Masjid Al-Aqsa. And then they said to Bilal, because Bilal was with them, And Sayyidina Bilal, since the death of the Prophet ﷺ, he had never done adhan after that. Yeah, because he couldn't, he just due to his love of the Prophet ﷺ, he couldn't bring himself to do adhan after the Prophet ﷺ has left this world. But because of the sacred place of Jerusalem, they said to Bilal, do adhan. Come on, Bilal, do adhan. So then Sayyidina Bilal, he done adhan for the first time after the passing of the Prophet ﷺ. So that was the story of Jerusalem. Any questions? Any questions? If you have any questions, just call out or raise your hands, feel free. Oh yeah. Let's take them now, inshallah. It's good to. If anyone does have any questions, you can raise your hand or just shout out. It's no problem, inshallah. Oh, quite a few, mashallah. So we're going to talk briefly about Conquest of Persia, so we can have a few questions in a minute. How to determine Islamic leadership? Is it always Qurayshi? Is it Ahlul Bayt, e.g. Quran and Sunnah, or Ahlul Bayt Hadith? I think I know what you're trying to say. Yeah, look, there is hadith, strong hadith, that the leadership is from Quraysh. And so in the Hanafi fiqh, for example, the Khalifa of the Muslims should be descended from Quraysh. That is a strong hadith. It's not in the Quran, obviously, or anything like that. I don't think it's mutawatir that you have to believe in it, but it's a strong hadith that the leadership is from Quraysh. So that is in the Hanafi school of law, that this leadership. But then, obviously, as time went on, basically after the Abbasid period, the Khilafah went out of the Quraysh, So when we had the Ottomans, before the Ottomans, we had some other, like Seljuks and these type of people. And that's probably why they didn't call themselves Khalifa, they call themselves Sultan. Yeah? So the later leaders of many of these Muslim empires, they call themselves Sultan rather than Khalifa. And some of them, they still recognize the Abbasid Khalifa. By that time, after the Abbasid Empire was gone, there was still Abbasid family in Egypt. They didn't have any power, but they still had their family. So some of them still recognize them as a type of Khalifa. But eventually, the Ottomans took the Khilafah as well. I can't remember which Ottoman Sultan it was exactly, but one of the Ottoman Sultans, he said, no, we're going to take the Caliphate as well. So I'm not just Sultan, I'm Khalifa as well. And generally, the Muslims sort of recognize that. The Sunni Muslims generally, they accepted that, that it's gone out of Quraysh into the Ottoman. But technically, it is true that it should be from Quraysh. There's no significance that it has to be Ahlul Bayt, unless you're a Shia, which hopefully none of us are. So there's no thing that it has to be. Look at Abu Bakr, Omar. They're not Ahlul Bayt. They're from Quraysh, but they're not Ahlul Bayt. Yeah. So there's no thing that it has to be from Ahlul Bayt. We have shown the history timetable. What does the next 50 years look like, e.g. trajectory? Next 50 years from here, you mean, or going forward from here? Next 50 years? I'm not sure what's the question mean, if anyone can just clarify. I think they mean what's the future 50 years from now? But I'm sorry, I don't have any sort of prophetic thing. But there is a science of ilm akhir al-zaman where we can look at things that will happen. So that's whole different topic I don't want to go into today. But right now I am writing a book on that. So inshallah, I'll share that with people when it comes out in the future. What is the wisdom of the messenger not explicitly appointing Abu Bakr? What's the wisdom? So I think we sort of hinted at that, yeah, it's not part of the deen. This is what we have to understand, because many human societies will come after, the Quran is a guidance for everyone. So I think for me, that's the wisdom, that there may be some Muslim lands that are Bedouins or they live in tribes, they may have their own system of choosing a leader. There may be, that's just, obviously the Muslim Ummah should be united under one leader, that is true. But in reality, after we said the High Caliphate period, it divided into many, many different autonomous regions, and everyone had their own leader. So it sort of allows for that expansiveness, for me, that's wisdom. But are there 5 Khalifa Rashidun, e.g. Hassan radiallahu? Yeah, correct. There are technically 5. Sayyidina Hassan was only for 6 months, so we sometimes when we say just for shorthand, there's 4. But Sayyidina Hassan was technically the 5th Khalifa Rashidun. Very good point. Quran is not arranged in chronological order. What is the arrangement, i.e. Surah 1 to 114? Yeah, the Quran is not in chronological order, correct. The arrangement of the Quran was given by the Prophet ﷺ, and it was given to him by Jibreel alayhi. So even though the ayahs are sent down at different times, they fit together, and the fitting together was known and taught. It's taught as part of the Quran, that this is how the surahs go, and this is which surahs go in which order. That was taught as part of the Quran. And those that memorized the whole Quran, because obviously there were many Sahaba that did memorize the whole Quran, they knew the order and the surah structures and so on. Okay, any other questions? So last few minutes we can quickly talk about the other side, the Persia. Oh yes. Okay, good question. How many people died on the Battle of Yarmouk on both sides? I don't think the numbers are known. I haven't come across specific numbers, but it was a very, very heavy battle. You know, we had all these, for example, these Romans chained up, so they had to be fought to the death, you know. So there were many casualties on both sides, but I can't answer the question. I think the Roman, there was massive numbers. Even when they were fleeing, the Muslims were chasing them. Many of them drowned. So, yeah, but I don't know the exact numbers, I'm afraid. There's definitely a lot more on the Roman side. Yeah, yeah. Not all of them, but there was a group, a large contingent of the Roman army, like gladiators and others. They chained themselves together in, you know, chains that you use for slaves, but they chained them so they can't run from the battlefield. So they have to fight to the death. So they were very determined, you know, that we're going to put an end to this Muslim threat. I think it was specifically for that battle they did it, you know. I don't know if they've done it in other places or not, but it was specifically because they realized, you know, we need to just stand and fight now. They were very determined for that battle. I didn't see them doing it in other battles against the Muslims. Okay, inshallah. So the other side obviously is the Persian Empire. Now, the Persian Empire is just as great and powerful historically as the Roman, if not more prestigious. Often we think of the Roman because it's our bias growing up in the West, because the West would like to think of themselves as the inheritors of Rome. If you look at a lot of British, American, you know, they claim to be inheritors of the Romans, basically. So that's why the Roman Empire is given a lot more history in the West. But historically, the Persian Empire, if anything, was the more sort of prestigious and wealthy, because it's in that area, Iraq, which is the one of the, like Egypt, is one of the breadbasket of the world. You know, the most fertile lands in the world. So the Persian Empire was completely taken by the Muslims during the time of Sayyidina Omar. So it meant that an immense amount of wealth was coming to the Muslims, and an immense amount of land as well. Very fertile land. This is a list of what happened. Remember Kisra, he's the one who tore up the letter of the Prophet ﷺ, Kisra, Khosrows in English. He was actually killed by Heraclius before the Umar armies came. After him, there was a rapid succession of emperors in the Persian Empire. The empire was basically falling apart we believe, because of the dua of the Prophet ﷺ. Remember, may Allah tear apart the kingdom like he's torn up my letter. So there was a lot of political instability, and over a few years there was a lot of change of emperors. So by the time the Muslim armies are coming in, you've got Yazdagird. His name's Yazdagird III. He's the emperor that fights against the armies sent by Umar radiallahu anhu, and eventually he's completely defeated, and he flees into to the Eurasian steppe lands far away, and he tries to make a little bit of a comeback, but it fails, and he basically dies. Eventually he's killed by one of his own men in the end. These are some of the main battles that take place. There were many battles during the conquest of Persia, but these are the name of some of the big battles. And once again, these are battles that all of our community should know about. You know, these are from not just Islamic history, but for world history. These are major turning points in world history. The first after the Muslims have had several small battles, they come to the Battle of Qadisiyah. The Qadisiyah is when the Persians send their big armies, and they're led by a general called Rustam, a famous Persian general called Rustam. And Rustam is obviously a great warrior. For the first time, the Muslims are facing war elephants as well. Yeah, so the Persians, they bring the elephants of war. Now, obviously, horses are a well-known weapon. They're a weapon, basically, because, if you have a horse, and the cavalry is one of the strongest parts of the army. But if you imagine war elephants, elephants are, and they're very intelligent beings as well, elephants, just like horses, so you can train them, for battle. So the Muslims are now facing this huge army. Once again, the Muslims are outnumbered maybe 3, 4, 5 times their number. The commander of the Muslims at this point is Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas is one of the great Sahaba. He's one of the 10 that are promised Jannah. He's one of the 6 that Omar will make in that panel. Anyway, but we'll come to that later. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas is one of those great warriors of the Sahaba. And he's basically the conqueror of Persia. And Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas is successful, and they defeat the Persians in this huge battle. And Rustam is defeated. After the Battle of Qadisiyah, the capital of the Persians fall to the Muslims. The capital was known in Arabic as Al-Mada'in, and in English is known as Ctesiphon. And this was probably the greatest city on earth at the time. It's the capital of the Persian emperors, the most wealthy city and greatest city on earth. You can see the ruins until today. That's the actual palace of the Persian emperor, which is in Iran today. And people, I haven't visited, but obviously you can see from the picture, there's people there, so it's a recent, So that was the actual arch into the throne room of the emperor. Look how massive that is. If you look at the human beings, you can see that was actually the arch going into the throne room. So when this city is taken by the Muslims, immense amounts of booty and wealth are coming into Medina. Because according to the Islamic law, 1/5 of everything that is taken of booty is sent back to Medina, where it's put into the public Bayt al-Mal, the public treasury. Then you have the final battle, and which is the biggest battle, is the Battle of Nahawand. This is when the emperor himself, Yazdagerd, comes himself with his largest army, and once again is defeated. And this battle became known to the Muslim as the victory of victories, because it was the final death blow for the Persian Empire. Just to finish, we'll just have a couple of minutes, we can just talk, obviously we talk a lot about battles and things like that, but obviously by this time now, Sayyidina Omar, he's got the largest land empire that the world has ever seen. And he's now obviously also focusing on administration. He's in Medina, remember? He's not leading these battles by himself. He's in Medina. The backup is there in Medina, right? So he's taking care of a lot of administration. He's dividing the empire into different provinces, and each province has its own governor, wali, and then you have deputy governors if it's a large area, and so on. And the governors are appointed directly by Umar himself. And one of the things that Umar was famous for, he would appoint, he would really appoint the best people to do these jobs, and he was very strict with them as well, that they have to follow a very simple lifestyle. He would go and check on them as well. Like one time, he made Abu Ubaidah the governor of Sham, up after the conquest of Sham. He made Abu Ubaidah the governor, and one day he done a surprise visit on him to see what he's up to, And he went to Abu Ubaidah's very simple house, and he came and the door was open. And he came in and he saw Abu Ubaidah sitting down with just very simple, no furniture, sitting on the floor, door open to anyone. And Umar started weeping, because he saw how his governor is, Nowadays you try to go and speak to a governor, you can't get past the locked doors, yeah? But Omar said, no, your door should be open to the public. I don't know if any of you have been to the governor of Punjab, for example. I had the, I can't call it a blessing, but I had a, I visited, when I was 16, they done like a tour of Pakistan with a group, and they took us to meet the governor of Punjab. It's like his back garden was like he had a zoo in his back garden. He had a massive lake, and you can't get near that place, if you're not allowed to go in there. Anyway, Sayyidina Umar also he set up these now garrison towns. This is a very important development of Sayyidina Umar. Because now the Muslims are conquering all these lands. He said to the armies there, he said, don't, he didn't want them to live amongst the non-Muslims at that time. So he set up these new towns. They were like, at that time, what you call army camp or something, like army cantonment or something. But because of over time, they actually became towns. So two of the famous ones were Kufa and Basra. For Persia, he set up Kufa and Basra as two army camps or towns, small towns. And as time went, obviously a lot of people came. These are now the rulers of the place. So many other non-Muslims come and live there and everything. But Sayyidina Umar wanted to keep the Muslim army separate from the people that we've taken over. And I think one of the greatest things, we'll finish on this point inshallah, I always feel one of the greatest things that Sayyidina Umar did, which was unprecedented, so he wasn't following the precedent. It was his own ijtihad. That the lands that were conquered by the Muslims, now remember, vast lands are coming under Muslim rule. What the Muslim wanted to do, the Muslims in the armies, they wanted to divide up the land as booty amongst themselves, as the conquerors. And they had every right to do that because this was actually the established sunnah before that. And like for example, when the Prophet ﷺ took Khaybar, the land was, actually it was surrendered, but part of the deal was to divide the land amongst some of the Muslims and some of the land was left to the Jews. But generally the rules of battle in those days were that if you take over any land as a conqueror, you get to keep the land and the wealth of that land is booty. And that was a general understanding of the Muslims. So when they've now taken Iraq and Sham, the Muslims in the armies, they're saying, let's divide it up and let's become rich. Omar said no. You don't take the land. You take the booty if you're taking, if you conquered a different army, you take the booty, fine. But we're not taking the land. We leave the land with the peasants. We leave the land with the poor farmers that are farming that land. They keep possession of it. So those peasants, they end up in a better position than they were before. Because before they were under Persian or Roman, paying all these taxes and oppressed under this rule. But now they're under the Muslims. These poor people, now they own their own land. And they stay on their land. And the Muslims, Sayyidina Umar forbade them from taking the land from these people. And I personally think that was one of the most amazing things that was done, because the Muslims were arguing with him. They said, we've got the right. Why are you changing the sunnah? Why are you stopping us? We've conquered this land. Give us the land. He said no. And so they submitted to his hukam. They submitted to his rule. And the people were left on their land. And the Caliphs that came after him, like Uthman and others, they continued that same precedent set by Omar. So this is one of the great things that shows that how Islam came as a mercy. It came as a mercy to people, not as an oppression. And those people, eventually, they all, those people who were left on their land, after some generations, they slowly, they all became Muslim. So, inshallah, we'll leave it there. That was one of the, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to understand the wisdom and the ranks of the Sahaba. Jazallahu anna Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Jazallahu anna Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Jazallahu anna Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursalin. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Any questions? Happy to take, inshallah. No, the fifth goes to the Baytul Mal. Not from the booty, as far as I know. No, they do have from the Baytul Mal. They are paid from the Baytul Mal. Certain. There's the last point on the slide actually. The state pension that said no Omar. He made it much more formalized. So from the Baytul Mal, he had a register of people that would receive payment. Generally, what happened with the Baytul Mal in those early days, the Baytul Mal was basically distributed amongst the people. It was literally a public treasury, and Sayyidina Umar formalized it more. He put a list of all the people. Everyone was entitled to some portion of the Baytul Mal. But what Sayyidina Umar done, he put some people above others. So the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, they have the highest amount that is paid. And then the Sahaba that were in the Muhajirun, they have a higher, the people of Badr, they have a higher rank. So he actually made a system which was called Sabiqa, in other words, your precedent Sabiqa in Islam, the people who were earliest in Islam, they were paid more from the Baytul Mal. So he had a whole system worked out. And the Ahlul Bayt were part of that. They weren't different, yeah.
Understand that you're open to different, ways of electing leaders. So when it comes to electing a leader, what's your view of democracy? Can the whole populace of the country, in your opinion, everyone above the age of 18, have the right to elect a leader?
Yes.
Is that okay in Islam?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, and I purposely avoided going into that specifically democracy. It's probably a long discussion as well, but I guess I was probably hinting at that. I personally think democracy is one of the worst forms of government, and that's based on my study of history. I think it's a very chaotic and very inefficient way of government, personally. The reason why it's so popular is because the West have become the rulers, since colonial period, since the 19th century at least. Great Britain was ruling most of the world. Now America is the big superpower. So everyone wants to copy the conquerors. Everyone wants to copy the people who are on top. And there's a natural thing to think that whoever's on top, they must be doing the right thing, the right way, So people imitate. So that's why democracy now is pretty much universal around the world. Everyone wants democracy, Even the Muslims that are fighting against some of these tyrants, they say we want democracy. So, what I'm going to say is I think it suits certain types of people. I think it suited Britain as an island nation, and it suited their temperament and their personality as a people. I don't think it suits everyone, but because Great Britain did become the superpower of the world, and it was ruling over most of the world at one time, a lot of the world, it's become very strongly entrenched in many places around the world that democracy is the best form of government. But your question is more specific. I know it's, does Islam allow for it? And I'm just going to avoid the question for now. But that's what I think about democracy. I think the one thing, one of my sheikhs, one of my teachers, Shaykh Muhammad Bashuaib, some of you probably know him, is very, mashallah, pious and humble man, and quite understated. But he once said, he just mentioned in the Quran, it says, "Aktharun nasi la ya'lamun." The majority of people don't have knowledge. The Quran says that majority of people don't have knowledge. So why are you voting? Why are you going to the majority? Democracy is majority rule, isn't it, in a way? Even though it's very. They won't allow that. They won't do referendums for every decision. That would be proper democracy, because that would be total chaos, So democracy doesn't even really function as true democracy anyway. But he said, and the other thing, I read there's a book called Murder State. Murder State. And it's by a guy called Lindsay, who's a Native American. He's a professor now in one of the American universities. And it's the story of how California and the west of America was conquered, taken from the Native Americans by the white settlers. You know, the white Europeans that came to America during mainly the 19th century, when they went to west. You know, they took over the west, and it basically talks of a genocide. You know, of the Native American people by the white Europeans that were taking over America. So it was a very horrific genocide. You know, they were literally at one point they were taking the children from these Native Americans from their families. You know, not kidnapping, but forcing them out of their families, taking them to Christian white schools. And they're not allowed to ever see their families again. They have to speak English. They're not allowed to speak their own language. They have to become Christian. A lot of horrific things were done. But the interesting thing was, and he points this out in the book, all of it was done through democracy. Like everything that the white people were doing was through voting. You know, they have their committees and they have their little assembly and they would vote, and the majority rule. You know? So democracy can go wrong very badly. If the majority suddenly decide in this country, we want to kill all the Muslims, we want to get rid of them, who's going to stop them? So there are definitely some downsides of so-called democracy, you know, because it's like a mob rule, you know. If everyone says let's kill the Native Americans, they're savages, this and that. You know what I mean? So any other questions? Inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Allah accept our fasting and your itikaf, inshallah. Make dua for me for the people in itikaf. And also those who are not in itikaf, please make dua for us, inshallah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.